Alright, Karina baby, today is July the 28th. Let's see, from a year full of stories for July the 28th. The Wise and Foolish Man. Once upon a time there was a wise man who spoke much of his time gazing at the stars, who spent much of his time gazing at the stars. He was fascinated by these tiny dots of twinkling light so far away in the heavens. He thought he could learn a lot from them. Right? That's a good idea. I think you can learn a lot from them too. One evening, as he was walking alone, with his head tilted back to look into the starry sky, he fell into a deep hole. "Help! Help!" cried the wise man. "Someone please get me out." But his cries drifted into the night. There was no one around to hear him, only the stars way up high. In the morning, a peasant woman came along, collecting wood for her fire, and heard the man's cries coming from the hole. "Well," said the woman, helping him out of his trouble, "what a foolish fellow you are! You are so busy looking up at the sky, you forgot to look under your feet." And the man had to agree. She was right. So sometimes you're trying to be so wise, right? But you don't see what's in front of you. It's like the man who has 3 drops of oil on a spoon and is walking through a castle, and the king tells him not to drop the oil, so he spends all of his time just focusing on that oil, right? And then he got to go through the castle again, because the king's like, "You didn't take not one look around," right? And then he looks at everything on the walls and all the artwork and all of the statues, and he gets back to the king. He has no oil on his spoon. And the king goes, "You were so busy looking around you, you didn't see what was right in front of you." So this man is looking at these beautiful stars, right? And he is walking and he's looking up at the stars and he's trying to see everything. And he fell into a hole, right? He's not looking at what's in front of him. So he's a wise man, and yet he's a foolish man. You have to pay attention to your surroundings sometimes too, baby. You have to pay attention to what's right in front of you as well as what's above you, alright? So if you're looking above you and looking at these beautiful stars, you're not paying attention to what's right in front of your feet, alright? Alright, let's see from the princess stories what's going on with them today. How the princess pride was broken. Okay. There was a princess who was as pretty as a picture, and she was so proud of that she would not so much as look at a body. All the same, there was no lack of lads who came a-wooing, and who would have liked nothing so much as to have had her for a sweetheart because she was so good-looking. But no, she would have nothing to do with any of them. This one was too young, and that one was too old, and this one was too lean, and that one was too fat. This one was too little, and this one was too big. This one was too dark, and this one was too fair. So there was never a white sheep in the whole flock, as one might say. Now there was one came who was a king in his own country, and a fine one at that. The only blemish about him was a mole on his chin. Apart from that, he was as fresh as milk, and rose leaves. But when the princess saw him, she burst out laughing. "Who would choose a specked apple from the basket?" she said, and that was all the cake the prince brought at the shop, for off he was pecked. So this lady was like, "I'm so pretty, I'm so perfect, I don't want anybody with even a small blemish," right? So she wouldn't give any of these suitors a shot at all. But he was not for giving up, not he. He went and dressed himself up in rags and tatters, Then back he came again, and not a soul knew him. Rat-a-tat-tat, he knocked on the door, and did that way a a stout lad about the place. Well, yes, there were wanting a goose herd, and if he liked the place, he might have it. Oh, that fitted his wants like a silk stocking. And the next day he drove the goose up on the hill back of the king's house so that they might eat grass where it was fresh and green. By and by he took a golden ball out of his pocket and began tossing it up and catching it. And as he played with it, the sun shone on it so it dazzled one's eyes to look at it. The princess sat at her window, and it was not long before she saw it. I can tell you, dear, but it was a pretty one, the golden ball. The princess would like to have such a plaything, that she would. So she sent one of her maids out to ask whether the goose herd had a mind to sell it. Oh yes, it was for sale, and cheap at that. The princess should have it for the kerchief which she wore about her the handkerchief which she wore about her neck. But the lad was a saucy one. That was what the princess said. But after all, a handkerchief was only a handkerchief. Fetch the goose herd over, and she would give it to him, for she wanted the pretty golden ball for her own, and she would have it if it were to be had. But no, the goose herd would not come at the princess's biting. If she wanted to play with the golden ball, she must come up on the hill and pay him, for he was not going to leave his flock of geese and have them waddling into the garden perhaps. That is what the goose herd said. So the upshot of the matter was that the princess went out with her women and gave the lad the handkerchief up on the hill behind the hedge, and brought back the golden ball with her for her own. As far as the goose herd, he just tied the handkerchief around his arm so that everybody might see it, and all the flock said, "Hi, that is the princess's handkerchief." The next day, when he drove his flock of geese up the hill, he took a silver looking glass and a golden comb out of his pocket and began to comb his hair. And you should have seen how the one and the other glittered in the sun. It took the princess no longer to see the comb and the looking glass than it had to see the golden ball, and then she wanted to have it. So she sent out to find whether the lad was of mind to sell them, for she thought that she had never seen anything so pretty in all her life before. "Yes," said he, "I will sell them, but the princess must come up to the hill and back of the hedge and give me the necklace she wears about her neck." The princess made a sore enough face at this, but as the gooseherd would take nothing more or less than what he had said, she and her maids had to tuck up their dresses and go up the hill. There she paid him his price and brought home the silver looking glass and the golden comb. The lad clasped the necklace about his throat, and dear, how the folks did goggle and stare. "See," said they, "the princess has been giving the gooseherd the necklace from her own throat." The third day it was a new thing the gooseherd had, for he brought out a musical box with figures on it, dressed up and looking for all the world like real little men and women. He turned the handle, and when the music played, it was sweeter than drops of honey. And all the while the little men and women bowed to one another and went through with a dance for all the world, and though they knew what they were about and were doing, it was with their own wits. Oh, gracious! How the princess did wonder at the pretty musical box. She must and would have it at any price. But this time it was 25 kisses that the lad was wanting for his musical box, and he would take nothing more and nothing less, just that much for it. Moreover, she would have to come up to the hillside to give them to him, for he could not leave his geese even for 25 kisses. But you should have seen what a stew the princess was in at this. 25 kisses indeed. And did the fellow think that it was for the likes of her to be kissing a poor gooseherd? He might keep his musical box if that was the price he asked for it. That was what she said. As for the lad, he just played the music and played the music, and the more the princess heard and saw, and the more she wanted it. After all, said she at last, a kiss is only a kiss, and I will be none the poorer for giving one or two of them. I'll just let him have them, since he will take nothing else. So off she marched with all of her maids to pay the gooseherd his price, though it was a sore face she made of it, and that is the truth. Now somebody has been buzzing in the king's ear, and had told him that the gooseherd over yonder was wearing the princess's handkerchief and her golden necklace. The folks said that she had given them to him of her own free will. What? Says the king. Is that so? Her handkerchief, golden necklace? We will have to look into this business. So he marched with his little dog on his heels to find out what he could about it. Up the hill he went to where the gooseherd watched his flock, and when he came near the hedge where the kissing was going on, he heard them counting 21, 22, 23, and he wondered what in the world they were all about. So he just peeped over the bushes, and there he saw the whole business. Mercy on us! What a rage he was in. So the princess would turn up her nose at folks as good as herself, would she? And here she is kissing a gooseherd back of the hedge, in the back of the hedge. If he was the kind she liked, she should have him for good and all. So the minister was called in, and the princess and the gooseherd were married then and there. And that was the end of the business. Then off they were packed to shift for themselves in the wide world, for they were not to live in the king's castle, and that was the long and the short of it. But the lad did nothing to grumble or growl, and seemed as sore over the bargain as though he had been trying to trick a Jew. What did he want with a lass for a wife who would neither brew nor bake nor boil blue beans? That is what he said, and all the same they were hitched to the plow, and there was nothing for it but to pull together the best they could. So off they packed, and the poor princess tugged after him and carried his bundle. So they went up on until they came to a poor man's little hut. There she had to take off her fine clothes and put on rags and tatters, and that was the way she came home. Well, said the gooseherd one day, it's not the good end of the bargain that I have had in marrying. All the same, one must make the best one can of the crock stick, which there is none other to be cut in the hedge. It is little or nothing you are fit for, but here is a basket of eggs, and you shall take them to the market and sell them. So off the poor princess went to the great town and stood in the corner of the market with her eggs. By and by there came along a tipsy countryman, tappity tap tap, trappity trap trap, for the basket. As for the basket of eggs, he minded them no more than so many green apples. Smash! And there they lay on the ground, and were fit for nothing but to patch broken promises, as we say in our town. Patch broken promises, look at that. Then how the poor princess did, writing her hands and crying, and cry, for she was afraid to go home to her husband because of the hard words he would be sure to fling at her. All the same, there was no other place for her to go. She went back, so back she went home. There, said he, I always knew that you were good for nothing but to look at, and now I am more sure of it than ever. Oh, he's cruel. He's very cruel. Those are cruel words. The china pitcher was never fit to stand to the wall, and it was a rainy day for me when I married such a left-handed wife. That was what the gooseherd said. All the same, the princess should try again. This time she should take the basket of apples to the market to sell. For whoever happened, she could not break them. So off she went again. Well, by and by came a fellow driving swine, and there sat the princess in the way. That was bad luck for her, for over tumbled the basket of apples, went rolling about in the streets. When the dove had passed their way, not a single apple to be seen, for the pigs had eaten every one of them. So there was nothing for the princess but to go home crying, with her apron to her eyes. Yes, yes, said the gooseherd, it is as plain as reading and writing, and the nose on your face, that you are just fit for nothing at all. All the same, we'll make one more try to mend the crack in your luck. The king up in the castle yonder is married, and I'm going to give a grand feast. They are wanting a body in the kitchen to drive the water and chop the wood. To draw the water and chop the wood. And you shall go and try your hand at that. And see, here is a basket. You shall take it along with you and bring home the kitchen scrappings for supper. So off she went, the princess, to the castle kitchen, and there she drew the water and chopped the wood for the cook. After her work was done, she begged so prettily for the kitchen scrappings that the cook filled her basket full of the leaving from the pots and the pans, for they were about having a grand dinner upstairs, and the king was going to bring home his wife that day. By and by it was time for her to be going home. So she picked up her basket and she went off. Just outside stood two tall soldiers. Halt, said they, and was she the lass who had been chopping the wood and drawing the water for the cook that day? Yes, then she must go along with them, for she was wanted upstairs. No, I did no good for her to beg and to pray and to cry and to wring her hands, and it mattered nothing if her good man was waiting for her at home. She had been sent for, and she must go willy-nilly. So she went, only just time to fling her apron over her basket of kitchen scraps, and off they marched her. There sat the king on his golden throne, dressed in all the splendid golden robes, and with a golden crown glittered upon his head. But the poor princess was so frightened that she neither looked at anything nor saw anything, but only stood there trembling. "What have you under your apron?" said the king. But to this the princess could not answer a single word. Then somebody who stood near snatched away her apron, and there was the basket full of kitchen scrappings. And all the time the princess stood, a heart struck with shame that she saw nothing but the cracks in the floor. But the king stepped down from his golden throne, dressed all in his golden robes, just as he was, and took the princess by her hand. "And do you now know me?" said he. "Look, I am the gooseherd." And so he was. She could see it easily enough now, but that made her more ashamed than ever. And listen, the king had more to tell her yet, but was a tipsy courtman, and had knocked over her basket of eggs himself, and more than that, he was the swineherd who had driven his pigs over her basket of apples so that they were spilled on the ground. But the princess only bowed her head and lowered her lower and lower, for her pride was broken. "Come," says the king, "you are my own sweetheart now." And he kissed her on the cheek and seated her beside him. And if the princess cried any more, the king wiped away her tears with his own pocket handkerchief, and for the poor and rough clothes in which she was dressed, he thought nothing of them, for they were nothing to him. That is the end of the story, for everything ends all right in a story worth telling. But it is the princess was proud and haughty before. She never was again, and that was the plain truth, fresh from the chum, and no hairs on it, and a lamp of it is worth spreading your bread with, I can tell you. So the princess, right, she was not willing to take any suitor. So he made himself cruel to her, then he was nice. I don't think he should have been cruel to her after, he should have been like, "It's alright that the basket tipped over, baby. It's gonna be okay." But he wanted to break her. He wanted to break her so he could mold her into being a better person and accepting him for who and what he is, right? Because she was so proud and she thought she was so beautiful. Alright, baby, let's do "We sit and watch the rain as it falls from the sky, and we are glad to be inside where it is warm and dry. Oh yes, I do love the rain. It keeps the earth so clean and helps the pretty flowers grow from the mountains to the streams." Let's do Lila Toe. Lila Toe, then good night to you. Lila Toe, may your dreams come true. We sing Lila Toe, may Israel protect you throughout the night until we reach the morning light. Karina, baby mama loves you. I love you and I miss you and I can't wait to see you. Like Papa used to always say, Papa's my moon, I'm his sun, and you are quite literally our rainbow baby, and we love you, no matter what. I love you, I miss you, I can't wait to hug you, I can't wait to take you places, I can't wait to do things with you. I love you so much, baby. Have a good day, honey.